such a pleasure to be with Martin Perdomo. Martin, you're the host of the Latinos in Real Estate podcast. You're an investor, you're a developer, and you're a mentor. So I know we have a lot of common ground here. So it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, brother. Thank you for having me, man. Really grateful that you invited me on your podcast.
So Martin, but you've got such a great backstory. But before we even start about that, what do you think about the environment right now? Because it's been such a wild few months. We're coming into winter, but then I feel like everything in our market is dominated by interest rates. And just even in the last month, suddenly the projection for next year is they're going to be lowering more than they thought. And there seems to be suddenly a bunch of excitement in the market. So where do you see us right now, the environment right now?
Well, thank you for asking. That's a real interesting question. And as you know, none of us have a crystal ball. I'll give you my opinion on what I think it's going to happen. The Feds have increased and hiked rates at the fastest pace ever in history, right? In the shortest time, the fastest ever in history. And I think the Feds and Jerome Powell and his team realize that if they don't slow down, they're going to break something, right? As it pertains to the housing market, I think there's a few fundamentals that we have to keep in mind. There's still a shortage of over 4 million homes, right? Housing shortage of 4 million plus shortage in America. That's number one. That's not going away. Number two, the demand has slowed down because affordability is out of the window. But when interest rates come down next year, so there's two camps, Lawrence. There's a camp that believes that interest rates are going to go up, and you've probably seen them and heard them, and they're going to keep going up. They're going to keep going up. And then there's a camp that believes that interest rates have to come down and they're going to come down. I'm in the camp that believes in interest rates, that interest rates are going to come down. I believe interest rates will come down. I've been saying this in 2024. I don't know that, the markets are pricing in 3 to 4 rate drops. I don't know that they're going to be that many rate drops, but I believe that the interest rates will come down at least 50 to 75 basis points next year. And that's going to drive buyer demand back into the market, because the minute that the rates get anything with a 5 or a 6 in front of it, buyers are going to come back out in the marketplace to buy more properties. That's just my thought. There's still a shortage of demand, right? Supply and demand. The supply is still very short, which is why we haven't seen a big amount of, crashes. We've seen crashes in cities like Austin, and I don't know what your city is like in Chicago right now, but what it's like over there, but in Illinois. But I know you're seeing cities like Austin, Texas getting beat, right? You got places in Vegas. You got a lot of the West Coast cities, California. A lot of these cities in certain areas are getting destroyed. But overall, the market overall as a country, we've seen an increase. I think the last report I read, and I got my weekly report. I do a weekly weekly market update. As you know, I haven't read it yet this morning. But last week's report, I think we were like a 4.5 or 4% year over year market, increase in real estate.
Which is wild when you think it's an increase with, like you said, the highest rate cut in history. So it's actually really interesting, Martin. In Chicago area, we're actually up a little bit. So I think with places like Austin and the West Coast, the prices just went up so much more, whereas the Midwest is very stable. So that when they came down, we're still stably creeping up higher. And I couldn't agree more with what you said about next year. It's so hard for me because I sell a lot of real estate. So I feel like I have a conflict of interest when I'm telling people, hey, rates are going to come down next year. And then anything that demand's going to come back, and anything you're buying now is going to look really good when you can refinance next year. But I feel like I'm being almost disingenuous, because they call it in trading, you're talking your book, you're talking your position. Like I'm obviously the seller, so I'm trying to encourage buyers to buy my buildings. But I really do believe that. I couldn't agree more with you. And I just don't see a world in which rates are lower next year and prices aren't the same or slightly higher. I just don't see a world where they're lower, given like you said, with the demand coming down.
What you're saying makes a lot of sense, right? And that sentiment and that feeling that you're feeling around that when you're saying that to your potential buyers. But the truth of the matter is that if you're using logic behind it, Lawrence, right? Right? You could be saying that and just speaking out of, there are realtors out there, by the way, there's many realtors out there that are saying that to people without having substance to back it up. You can say that and you have substance to back it up because you're educated in the space. Unfortunately, there are some realtors that are just salespeople. They're not professionals, and there's no. I'm not digging on realtors. I love you guys. It's just some realtors are just not studying the market. And listen, I've talked to realtors you say you can ask some realtors, do you know who Jerome Powell is? And they'll say that who's that, right? And no shade on them. But if you don't know who Jerome Powell is, you're a real estate agent. You need to go and really check your what you're doing, right? Because that person, Jerome Powell, has a major impact on what's going to happen in the future of your business. So when you say that, when I hear that from a guy like you, and then you say what you just said, right? You understand the market. You're hearing, like yesterday, we had a Fed meeting as we record this. Is December 14th, and on the 13th, which was yesterday, the Feds met and they didn't rate cut. They actually there's language in Jerome Powell's speech that he's going to, they didn't rate increase, that they're going to rate cut next year. So that's a good thing for us, right? For you and I, investors, real estate people, that they rate cut, because that's going to increase demand again. That brings the buyers back out. That allows us to refinance and be able to cash flow. I'm talking about the investor crew now. As investors, we're the job creators, right? And real estate, construction, development is one of the biggest job creators in our country, right? How many people do we employ when we do one transaction? When you sell a property, how many people do you employ? A lot of people, mortgage brokers, title, insurance people, appraisers. How many people, make money from us? So the Feds know this, and they know that they have to, and of course, I'm being biased as well because I am in the business. I'm a real estate guy, right? So just some things to consider, Lawrence.
Well, Martin, I'm so glad you said that, because when I first moved to the US, I was working as a trader at the time, and my trading company sent me here. I was 23 years old. Looking back, I barely knew anything. And I remember one of the older traders said to me at the time, Alan Greenspan was the Fed chair. And he said, do you know who the most powerful man in America is? And I said, the president. And he said, no, it's the Fed chair. He can control the economy. And it's exactly what you said. And for people that work in our business and they don't know this stuff, just good advice is just invest in yourself. And I think learning about economics and basic finance is really going to help you as a broker. So that's really, really great advice.
Yeah, it's really simple, guys. If you're a realtor and you're listening to this, it's really simple. If I have one of my early mentors, Lawrence, and I think I mentioned this to you when you was on my podcast, and that was that he said to me, one of my early mentors in real estate, he said to me, whenever let's say you're at the airport and you're walking and you run into us and you see a news flash on a TV screen at a bar or something, and you hear anything that has to do with the Federal Reserve Board and interest rates, you stop and you pay attention to what that Federal Reserve Board is doing as it pertains to interest rates, because it impacts your business. It will impact your strategy. It will impact the future of what you should be doing and how you should be investing in real estate. And that has stood with me, man. And that's my advice to any broker or realtor listening is, you should be paying attention to when the Feds meet, making sure you're up to date with that news, because that's going to dictate your demand for housing and affordability for housing. As we're seeing a dry up in demand right now across the country with, we're seeing inventory creep up, but nothing crazy. As we're seeing demand dry up for real estate because of interest rates, right? You need to make the average person, Lawrence, the average household needs to make $114,000 per year in household income to qualify for the median household price right now in America. $114,000. I think the average household makes around $65,000 or $70,000. So they're just priced out of the market. So either two things have to happen. Interest rates have to come down for affordability for Americans to be able to buy houses again, or B, prices have to drop. And, there were the bears in the market that were betting that the prices was going to drop and that we were going to see a crash. And I believe that we were going to see a correction. And in some markets, we've seen major corrections. Austin's seen 20% drop, right, from their peak. But still, inventory is just not there. People don't want to sell their house. So we have some challenges we're navigating in this marketplace.
I always look at when I look at the prices in. I really don't know too much about other markets. I kind of focus on the Midwest, and when I look at the replacement cost of a building, say I got on a contract in a 3-unit new construction building yesterday for $855, and I think about the cost it takes to build that, and I think about the lot, and I think about the holding costs and the carrying costs and the interest rates if you're getting a development loan. These developers are not making much money, so that's why I don't see it in my market. I just don't see any way the prices are going to come down because the developers can't make any money, so they're not going to build. And like you said, there's this national shortage, and I know there's a Midwestern shortage too of housing. So I think it's got to be the interest rates. I think there's so much political pressure coming to the election next year that I think you're conservative, Martin. I think you said 50 to 75 basis points. I could see it being 125, easily. So we'll see. Yeah, I think
I'd love that, brother.
I really think we're going to have a crazy busy and a good 2024. So it's that's my prediction.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears, brother. Seriously, man. Seriously. It's just this guy, Jay Powell, he keeps talking about this inflation thing and this inflation and inflation and inflation. And that's a real thing for Americans and most working class family that has to be navigated, right? Stability, price stability. He keeps talking about that. And that's the thing that's on his mind. I think we're gonna see unemployment tick up. I think we're gonna see unemployment go up past 4%. That also has an impact, right? As people lose jobs, that also brings inventory to the market. People can make their payments and things like that. But but on the other side of that, that helps with the Feds wanting to lower the interest rates because they got to spark the economy again. But a couple days ago. We had a new record high for the stock market. Record high for the stock market because of what the Fed said. Hey, we're going to potentially cut rates next year. The market got really excited about that. I was excited about that for sure, brother. I got a couple of developments and I'm like, yeah, man, I got to refi those puppies out. And you know what? I never even thought about what you just said, Lawrence. You made a really good point when you just said that you don't know how developers are not making money. I'm looking at some properties in Florida and I'm seeing developments literally stop. I'm seeing communities literally stop the building because the cost of money is too high. And so the feds have a tough job. The government has a tough job because you still have to provide housing for people. The guys that provide housing for people are you and I, the entrepreneurs. But if you make the cost of money so unbearable that it doesn't make no sense, we're not doing it to lose money, right? We're doing it to make money. We're capitalists. So if that gets too high, we're not going to be excited to go out there and create more housing that's desperately needed, especially affordable housing.
It's so true, Martin. It's such a delicate balance, and there's so many moving parts when you think about an economy. And I don't envy the Fed's position because, like you said, they're trying to balance the unemployment and the inflation, and it's really tough. And talking about the stock market being on new highs, it just makes me think that the best advice I always try and give people is invest in real assets. And it doesn't have to be real estate. It can be real estate. It can be stocks. It can be, I've got a friend that makes a lot of money investing in luxury things like luxury watches and, old cars that appreciate. You have to just, art has done very well the last 20 years. You just have to find your niche with assets because it seems like we're in a world where the rich are going to keep getting richer. And the people that don't have assets are going to keep struggling because they're going to see, I think inflation is going to be lower, but I think it's going to be here to stay because I think there's too much political pressure for them to keep doing stimulus and keep adding to the money supply. So we're just it's very sad because those people that have all the stocks, they're very wealthy, they're loving life right now. And the people that don't have any assets are seeing their rent go up, seeing their grocery bills go up. They're really struggling. So my heart goes out to them. And I always just tell people, just spend a little bit less. Don't spend all the money you make and just invest in something. Because if you see this inflation is gonna go to all real tangible assets. So I always try and spread that message.
I love that you said that, and I want to share. I want to share something with you. Something that occurred to me just now as you're saying that. I got my first house when I was 21, 22. My wife and I were. We were kids. That's young. And I was making $50,000 a year, and my wife was pregnant. We had 2 kids, and we were pregnant with our third. we were on our way. No, we were on our way with our second. Sorry, on our way with our second. I forget. I got 4 kids, so they all got mixed up in the head. we were pregnant with. Well, she was pregnant. She carried those. So she was pregnant with our second, and I was only making $50,000 a year. So I hear a lot of, and I had an interest rate back then of 9.75. This was in the year 2000, right? Wow. 9.75, brother. And I purchased that house. I was an FHA loan. I purchased that house for $179,000. And I hear a lot of younger people say, well, I can't buy a house because real assets are so expensive and price and interest rates are so expensive. But guess what, man? It's relative to every generation. Back then, to me, $179,000 was a hell of a lot of money, right? At 9.75%, making $48,000 a year with a wife and 2 kids is barely making it. So it's all relative. My question for you is, Lawrence, what advice would you give young people today as a realtor that want to buy real estate, that might be in my position 25 years ago, right? Coming to you like, hey, I can't afford it. Or what do you say to those kids that are, and they're legit, man, like, look, these kids have, the youth today, they have a problem. They have school debt. They were sold a bag of bullshit with this school loan shit, with the school, and excuse me, man, I'm just calling it as I see it. I've always seen it that way. They were sold, we are sold a bag of crap. Like if you're not going to be a doctor, an engineer, an attorney, or something like that, I seen them. I hire them, right? These people that come with these fancy degrees, and they wind up working for me with a high school diploma to be my sales team, right? Like I've hired these people, and they don't need that degree. And no shade on you, but it's not their fault. It's just we've been sold it. But these folks have all of this extra debt, man, and it's tougher for them. What advice are you giving them, Lawrence? What are you telling them?
So if you can, I mean, what you said is great advice. You use an FHA loan, which is putting down just a few percent. And when I don't know how much you deal with just regular buyers. So the last year, we couldn't even get FHA loans for above 2 units because the bank needed them to pass this self-sufficiency test. And with the rates being where they were, there was no building that could pass it, because if the building could, it wouldn't be in good condition. And the FHA loan requires a building to be in livable condition. So we couldn't do anything FHA, but they just passed a new loan, which is 5% down up to like 1.1 million for a 4-unit. So that loan, if you can, borrow from a relative, borrow from a parent, get some credits from the seller, try to get that 5% down to, 1 or 2% down. Then maybe if you've got a little, you can make a little bit of money and save. That would be a good option. But if you're not even there, if you can't even afford that, I think you have to, and you're very young, I think you just have to sacrifice today for a better tomorrow. And I had a 2-bedroom, and this was a tiny 2-bedroom unit I was renting in Chicago. And I had a showing, and these young Russian immigrants were there, and there was 3 of them. And I said, they were really nice guys, and they were kind of bigger guys too. And I'm like, all 3 of you are going to sleep in this apartment? And I got chatting with them, and they were great. They said, listen, one each is going to take a bedroom. One's going to be on the sofa. We're all hustlers. We're trying to make something of our life, and we want to have low overhead. So we're going to split this rent. I think it was $1,600. We're going to split it 3 ways, $533 each. And we're just going to hustle and put our head down. And they were my tenants for 2 years, and they worked really hard. And they all did okay for young guys. So they must have just been saving so much money. So those 2 years of sacrifice, I'm sure they went on to great things. They got to buy a place, and they got to improve their life. But they took a few years of sacrifice. And I think too many people today in the Instagram culture, they want the quick fix without doing the work. And if you're young, you've got to put the more you sacrifice when you're young, the better your future life will be.
Yeah, brother. And I love that you say that, because a lot of, like you said, because of the Instagram, the instant gratification, the Instagram world, the Facebook, the social media world is, they'll look at guys like you and me. We're in our 40s, man. Like we've been there. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've been there, done. Like we've passed through all that. And here, we're giving you the wisdom. We're giving you the game. Like, hey, if you can, here's the one thing I've figured out in my 40s, right? As I've gotten older and I've gotten smarter, is that, hey, listen, The secret and the difference between the haves and the have-nots and the self-made, because 90% of self-made millionaires around the world are made through real estate. Guys, you can Google that, right? 90% of self-made millionaires around the world are made through real estate. Google that. The difference with those of us that come from nothing and create something is that we figured that exact same thing that you just said. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. Sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. And the more you do that, it compounds, and you'll wake up one day and you'll say, okay, you don't have to do that forever, but if you sacrifice for a few years and you surround yourself with some smart people that guide you and help you, and you get the right information and you get the right mentors and the right coaches, you can level up. And before you know it, 3-5 years, you're in a place that you're like, man, I can't believe I did this. Like, I'm financially free.
So true. I think there's a famous saying from one of the, like Tony Robbins, or one of the famous motivational speakers. And he says, we always overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10, because it's 10 years stacked on top of each other, and it becomes, almost exponential growth. And it's so true. Martin, can we go back to young Martin? I know you had a real, you had a real rags to riches life story. And can we go back to your youth, and can you talk a little bit about the things you had to overcome, and then your journey to success? Because I think it's so inspirational.
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm in my 40s. I'm 45. My mother came pregnant here to the United States of America with me in 1978. She was a few months pregnant with me, and I was the first generation born American, Lawrence. And I always I'm always grateful to my mom. I take my mom out to dinner once a month. We hang out, we spend time. I talk to my mom every week, multiple times. And I tell her how grateful I am for her at 22, 23 years old, coming here with me, kid, to a foreign land, foreign country that doesn't know the language. That's the toughest woman I know, my mom. Big up to my toughest woman. That's courageous to do something like that, because she had a dream and she had a vision of a better life. And it was, now I look at it as my responsibility to a better life for us, to make sure that I actualize that dream for her. So anyway, she came pregnant here with me, and naturally she had me here. So I'm the first one born in this country of my whole family. And then she sent me back home to the Dominican Republic, Lawrence. But when you think of poverty, I'm the poster child of poverty. We were so poor, we didn't have running water in our house. I had to walk. I remember as a baby child with my grandma, my sister, walk about a half a block to go get running water, so we have these tanks. We have running water to flush the toilet or to take showers. We had tin as roofs. So when it would rain, the sun beats on the tin and it makes these little pinholes. It would rain in the house, and we had to put buckets and then throw the water out. That was how the first 5 years of my life. And early on in my life, I had made a decision, and my mom had me come here at the age of 5 to go to school. And I went to school in New York City, grew up in the ghetto, as you would say. At 16, my mom kicked me out because I was not following her rules. And it's tough. And I sympathize with my mom, because it's very hard for a single woman, to try to raise a man, especially in the hood, in the ghetto. It's very hard. So she kicked me out my 16th birthday, and I slept in trains and I slept in rooftops in New York City for a while. And it was there, Lawrence, where I fell in love with real estate. I realized that as a human being, I made an unconscious decision. You need two things. You need housing and you need food. Basic necessities. When you don't have nothing, when you're at the bottom of the bottom and you're sleeping in the train and you're going to the beach to sleep at the beach, right? Or you're sleeping in rooftops, or you sleep in the park. Those are the two things. You want shelter and you need something to eat. And I realized that I needed those two things. And I made a commitment unconsciously that I was going to own a lot of real estate, so that I never, ever, ever, ever have to go through that again. I was going to own apartment buildings that I never have to go through that pain again, and not having a place to live. And I'll share the story with you. One day, my wife and I, we've been together since we were teenagers. We were about 17 years old, and I was a manager at a store called The Body Shop. And she comes with her best friend. They're still best friends to today. We were just talking about this weekend. She came to visit us. And so Martha, if you're watching this, I want you to remember this. And they come to pick me up at the store. And we're in Harlem. I don't know if you've ever been to Harlem. So Harlem in the 90s was burned down buildings, 125th and 5th Avenue, the body shop. Those of you from New York City know what I'm talking about. There was a body shop there in the 90s in the corner. And they came to pick me up, and I walked out the store, and I remember looking at a building, Lawrence. I'm 17 years old now, looking at a building across the street. And I tell my then girlfriend, my wife today, hey, babe, you see that building up there? You see how it's burned? And the windows were all open, right? And she goes, yeah. I said, can you imagine if I took that building and I bought it and I fixed it and then I rent it? I would be rich. That's what I want to do. I just don't know how to do it. Like if I took that building, and we talk about that today because that's what I do today, right? Yeah. I had this vision even as a kid that I wanted to learn to do that so I don't ever have to have that pain. And then coincidentally, it happens that 90% of self-made millionaires in the world are made through real estate investing. And that's kind of been my journey. Today, I have 140 doors. Today, I have 140 apartments. We have 160 units apartment building under contract, which we're in the middle of due diligence in Tulsa. So I'm investing here. We buy, fix, and flip. I have a wholesaling business. I have a flipping business. And then I have a portfolio and a portfolio of buy and hold where I syndicate some deals, and some deals I just buy by myself. And I have some partners and JB. Yeah. So it's been a really interesting journey. A lot of things there in between. A lot of people came along the way and helped me, Lawrence. I would say the biggest thing for me, the biggest growth happened when I realized that I needed to work on me. When I decided to start investing in me and my skills and my mindset, that's when I exponentially grew. When I made the commitment to, Martin's got to get better. So start going to workshops, start being around smarter people, coaches, mentors, just constantly reading and looking for new information to get better. I remember, Lawrence, being in the train as a 16-year-old kid, right? Not having a place to live, not having food, right? And at the time, I had a girlfriend. It was not my wife before my wife. I had a girlfriend that I would go to her house and she would feed me. Her mom would cook for me and she would feed me. And I remember, Lawrence, praying when I was working at McDonald's, praying. It was one prayer I used to pray. And it was, God, please send me someone. Please, Lord, send me someone that can teach me how to be an investor. Teach me how to buy those buildings. Teach me, right? I don't want anything given. I can work. I will work. I will do it. Teach me. And God sent me many throughout the years, books and things and seminars, workshops, relationships, people, many mentors throughout the years. And today, the reason I have my podcast, Lawrence, is because today is my turn to be that person that I was praying for, right? It's my turn to be. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've been praying for that, you're getting it, right? Because I was praying for that. So for me today, I got to be the guy I was praying for. And that's why I do all this stuff. That's why I come on podcasts. That's why I share my story, right? Because if I could do it, a poor kid can do it with English as a second language, and you can tell, right? English is a second language, then you can do it too.
Martin, that's so beautiful. The two reasons that I was really drawn to you is the first, when we first spoke, I realized that you weren't just a real estate guy that didn't know much about economics and finance. Mm-hmm. I knew straight away, just from talking to you, like this guy knows his stuff. So I was very impressed by your more broad knowledge about all those things. But the other thing I really appreciate about you is exactly what you said, is your mission to give back. And I think there's some duty that people kind of, you owe it to society, in the kind of world that I would like to live in. Is first you take care of yourself, and then when you get yourself to a good position, then you start giving back. And too many people wait. I think they wait until, I've got everything figured out and I've got all this money and I don't never have to worry about anything again, and then I'll give back. And I always think, no, that's too soon. As soon as you're on your feet, you should start giving back. And that's one of the reasons I love this podcast too, is just spreading knowledge. I think how much knowledge that I thought I was a well-read smart guy a few years ago, but just the last few years, how much knowledge and wisdom I've got from podcasts and listening to people like you. There's so much out there, and it's all free. It's a crime for you not to take advantage. And that idea of investing in yourself, I've given that advice, Martin, to so many people. So many people are so focused on the immediate step of their career and how I'm going to make a bit of money and how am I going to make enough money to buy this car or take this vacation? And I always think that's such short-term thinking. The real winners in life are long-term thinkers. They're not thinking about how I'm going to make money tomorrow. They're thinking about how I'm going to invest in myself to have a lifetime of opportunity, and that idea of exactly what you said about investing in yourself. But can I ask you, so you were I'm sure that the people you grew up around in that environment, you were very unique in having those big dreams, in looking at those burnt out buildings and seeing the opportunity and the money you could make there. Where do you think that dream came from?
That's a good question, man. I think it came from the struggles, right? So I'm also a certified coach, right? Certified hypnotherapist and coach. And what we've learned when I went through my training, what I learned was that who you are in your values, you get them between the ages of 0 and 5. So your belief system, you get them between 0 and 5. And I remember as a very, very young, like asking my grandmother, even when I was living in DR, right? 0 and 5, I wanted to, Dominican Republic, we are baseball players. Dominicans are known for baseball, right? So everyone in the neighborhood was playing baseball. And I remember asking my grandmother that I wanted to join a baseball team. All the kids are in this baseball team. I want to play baseball. We could, even though my mom was here working and getting dollars, we couldn't afford to put me in the baseball team. And we were all poor. And amongst all of my poor friends, most of them were in the baseball team, right? They had their cleats, their little, their baseball stuff. And they could never afford to put me in. They could never afford to buy me the things I needed, right? Or my dad, right? And my dad was, I saw my dad working hard. He was an entrepreneur. He owned a mechanic shop in the Dominican Republic. Then he came here and he owned his own shop here. And early in the game, I remember I still tell my mom this, we joke about it now, that I did not like not having the things I wanted when I wanted, and that I was not born to be poor. My mom and I still joke about that when we go out to dinner. Like, Mom, I'm not born to be poor. You know that, right? And we joke about, like, I would tell my mom this consistently. Mom, I'm not, and my grandma, I'm just not born to be poor. I just reject the notion of, like, how, the thing for me was like, how do these people live in Park Avenue with all the nice things, and I live here in the ghetto with the mice and the rats and shit and the dirt? How? Well, like, how? We live in the same, like, what do they know that I don't know? What are they doing what is it that I need to, who do I need? So God, send me that person to teach me how to do that. Right? So I always had a thing that, I was not born to be poor, and that made me different. I will tell you this. I remember when I first, I got my insurance license, because that's when I was first exposed to like professional sales, when I was 19, and I was studying for this test. And I remember for the insurance test, I remember being outside with my friends. It was the night before my birth, actually the day before my son was born. I was outside and I was drinking 40 ounce. Right? I stopped smoking at that time because I was studying it, but I was drinking with my friends in the streets, right? Like you see in front of the bodega where I was drinking, and I was sharing with them. Here I am, a 19-year-old kid, Lawrence, okay? And I was telling these guys, because I had seen a little bit of light, because I was studying for this test and I started understanding money and finances and life insurance and this and stuff. And I was telling these guys, right, in the corner, like, yo, dude, do you guys realize that we live in a hole? I was using this metaphor. I'm a 19-year-old kid. Do you guys realize that we're in this hole and it's our job to try to dig out of here? Like this, you don't realize that this hood that we live in, it's a deep well. And if we don't think, we don't use our minds to think, we're never going to get out of here. And it's our job to dig ourselves out of here. This was me at 19, right? Incredible. Saying this to these guys. So I've always been a little bit different like that. I've always been a kind of a visionary. And I knew I needed to get out of there. It wasn't easy, but I knew I needed to get out of there.
Well, that's the first thing. I feel like too many people don't even dream big. And if you don't dream big, you're not even going to start the process of taking the steps to figure out how to get to that next level. So that's amazing you had that. So was it really tough from being from the homeless kid trying to figure it out? So you said you bought your first place at 22. How much did you have to learn and grow during that period? Was that really tough, or was it just once you were 19 and you got an insurance? It was I guess you must have been exposed to people that taught you what the next steps would be to buy your first place.
That's a really good question. So I've always been very competitive. My whole life been very, very competitive. So my sport is basketball. So when I would go New York City, basketball was born in New York City, right? Some of the best ballers are from New York and in New York. And when you go to the park in New York City, oftentimes in these parks and anywhere, they'll have 3 full courts, right? And there's levels, right? Usually you'll have, in the first full court, you'll have the little kids that are not that good, right? And then you'll have the next. It's interesting because if you watch it, you can literally see the levels of players.
Right.
The middle court, you would see the kids that are, they're okay. They're playing, they're okay. And then in the last court, you would see the ballers, right? The real ballers, right? The older kids really doing it, dunking and do just the real ballers, right? Yeah. And I was never that. I was never that guy, the baller guy. I was more in between the middle and the players, right? But I would always go to play with the ballers because I always knew if I played there, I was going to level up. And if I could play there, I could play anywhere, right? Just a competitive nature of me. So when I got my insurance license, and at the time, my boss was 25 years old, the guy that hired me, and he saw something in me and he was like, hey, you got to get out of your environment. And then he started exposing me to Earl Nightingale. I don't know if you know Earl Nightingale, the strangest secret in the world. He's the godfather. We call him the godfather of personal development. Check him out. There's a great audio free, The Strangest Secret in the World. And he started exposing me to this stuff. He started exposing me to, I can't remember these 2 guys, to they're salespeople. They're teaching motivational sales. And I'm like, whoa. And I started tapping into my genius, right? I started tapping into my potential by listening to this stuff. And then I would see, now I was leveled up, right? Now I'm around other insurance people, I was the only colored person in my office, right? I was the only Latino in my office, a bunch of white guys with houses, nice cars. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then I start building relationship with these guys. And these guys weren't much smarter than me. They weren't much better than me. As a matter of fact, I used to look at them and think like, hey, dude, like they would look at me and say, hey, I have this lead and it's in the Bronx in the project. I used to look at them like I had a leg up on them because they would say, I have this lead. It's in the Bronx in the projects. I don't want to go, Martin. You want to go? And I'd be like, give me that, hell yeah, because I'm from there, right? I don't care. I'll go there. I know how to navigate in those waters. So I had an advantage. I spoke 2 languages, and I could go to the ghetto and sell there, and I could go to Park Avenue because I could switch it up and sell there. So that gave me an advantage. And so started being around these guys have houses, and I was like, wait a minute, if this guy could do it, he's not much smarter than me. Actually, I think I'm more talented than he is. Then I can do it. And that pushed me. It was my environment that leveled me up. So this is why I always tell people, like, your environment is important. Now, I didn't know anyone that owned a house in this country until I was in that environment. Right? I would look at Anthony, which was my manager at the time, and I'm like, this guy's smart. He's good, but man, I could do that too. He's not that much smarter than me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then I started learning about personal development, reading books, and made my first 6 figures at 24, wow. 25, 24 going on 25.
Man, that idea of environment is so important. If I had someone ask me and they were in a really bad area with friends or bad influences, excuse me, and they said, the first advice I would give them is you've got to get outside that environment and be with people that you're going to learn from, that are going to inspire you. You don't want to be, so many people have that mindset where they like being the man. They like being the the big fish in a small pond, but you're never going to grow that way. Whereas if you go to the bigger ponds, like you said with the basketball courts, if you go to where you're challenged, that's where you're going to grow. But there's something in so many people. It's like human nature, and I have it in me. I have to always overcome it. Where you always go towards safety and ease, and you have to force yourself to get out and go towards to hardship and difficulty and the big pond and the environments that intimidate you, because that's when you know you're going to be growing.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's always my first advice to mentees, right? When I start mentoring someone, it's like, listen, understand that you want me to mentor you, but you understand that as you level up, you're going to shed some of your old relationships. You're going to naturally shed them because you're going to start hanging out with people that are doing bigger, better things. You know, I was talking to my son-in-law a week ago, and he's asking me questions. He wants me to mentor him, and I spend time with the kid. And I'm like, listen, kid, the first thing is you are with the 5 people you spend time with. If you're spending time with, and he's an auto mechanic at a dealer, that if you're spending time with all of your friends, let's say you and all of your coworkers go out to work after work to dinner, and you guys are hanging out, and you're all making range around the same amount of money. Let's say $60,000 a year. I'm going to use the number. I don't know what they make. I'm going to say that. Say $60,000 a year. What are you guys going to talk about? You guys are going to talk about, no disrespect, you're going to talk about $60,000 a year ideas. You're going to talk about what you're doing on Saturday, what game you're going to watch, what beers you're going to drink. You're going to talk about your $60,000 a year ideas. Your ideas and your conversations are going to be around I just bought this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, or, you know, that's, I can't wait to take my next vacation, and I'm going to, right? And come to my house, to my basement, like to the basement, and let's check out my man cave, and let's watch the game, and nothing wrong with that. But understand that at that level, that's the conversations you're going to have. Nothing wrong with it. You just got to understand it. When you move up, now let's say you move up to another circle, and now you're going out to dinner with a different circle, and now same circle, same number of people, but these people are all entrepreneurs. They're all making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And now they're talking about different things. They're talking about, I'm going to deploy $500,000 into this deal. I'm buying this 5,000 square foot house, right? Hey, I'm moving over here. Hey, I'm investing over here. And now the conversations are different. Now the conversations are, hey, I'm going to go climb this mountain on vacation because I want to experience this thing in India, right? The conversations are different. What's going to happen to you mentally is you're going to level up. So if we're constantly talking about investing, and we're constantly talking about, hey man, I just made 20 grand on that deal, or I just made $100,000 on this flip, or I just did this, or I just did that, I made 250,000, and you're the smallest guy there, you know what's going to happen to you eventually? You're gonna nudge one of them and say, hey, how do you do that? How do I do that? How do I get started? And doors are going to open up for you. So it's all about your environment. It's all about your environment, who you're listening to, number one, and who you're spending time with. Who you're listening to matters. Right, Lawrence? Yeah. Who you're listening to matters. You know, we have a lot of issues right now in the world with I think you like this post. I think I posted it yesterday where a lot of people are not logically thinking anymore. Like, yes. Like, hey man, there's just a lot of craziness. Like, there's 2 sexes, right? And I don't want to go into, but there's only 2 sexes. There's male and female. There's not 100 sexes, you know, and like, there's just common sense. Like, a lot of people are not logically thinking, and they're following the mob. And I like to believe that when the mob is going in one direction, the mob usually doesn't know. I always question when the mob is going in one direction, it's like, okay, why are they all going that way? Stop. Why are you going that way? What are you going that way? That doesn't make sense to me. And I like to process myself. So, you know, people don't like to, nowadays, people are, with social media, people are fed a lot of stuff and they don't process and think, right? It's the mob. It's what, you know, Earl Nightingale in The Strangest Secret in the World, he makes a statement. really powerful, really impactful. And I heard this 20 years ago. And he says, if you were to knock, and I'm going to challenge all of your listeners, listen to this. It's only 29-minute listen. It's free on YouTube. It's amazing. If you were to knock, and he recorded this in the 30s. In the 30s, he recorded this. If you was to knock on 100 doors in America, you was to ask them, why do you wake up and you go to work every day? 90% of them, 90 of them will tell you they don't know because everyone else is doing it. That's what you do. You wake up, you go to work, you pay your bills. They don't know. And only the other 5 to 10% will know exactly why they're doing and why they're going to work. They have a purpose. So most people are doing things because everyone else is doing it, not because that's what they really want to do.
That's so true. There's a great quote, Martin. It said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And I think about that a lot. And I think how many people today are just addicted, unhappy, miserable, unhealthy. You don't want to be following the crowd if that's where it's going to lead you. So I really do love that. How did you make the jump from being an employee who was doing very well selling to being an entrepreneur where you were working for yourself? Because a lot of people, when they were making that kind of money at a young age, especially coming from your tough childhood, you'd have been just satisfied. But there's something in us entrepreneurs where you're never satisfied. Because I had the same exact question when I went to start my own trading company. One of the guys said, "You'll never leave. Like you'll never leave the job you're at because life is too good for you." And I said, "Oh, watch me." So because you take the risk of being an entrepreneur, but there's something, it's so satisfying about having that. I mean, I guess some people are not everyone's born for it, but I think there's something so satisfying in eating what you catch and being solely responsible for you and not relying on someone else, but also not having to deal with someone else's bullshit. I had some awful bosses when I was young, and I never forgot that. I always thought when I was dealing with these awful bosses that there'll be a day where I don't have to ever deal with a boss again.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's part of my big reason. So when I lived in Dominican Republic, my father was an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship is in my DNA. My dad owned a mechanic shop. We were poor, right? But he owned the shop. And then my grandmother in our backyard, she had a brick laying company. So here I am, right, little baby, seeing my grandma go to the backyard with these grown men lifting these bricks, right, making these bricks to sell them, right? So I've always, from a very, very young age, I seen trading, I seen entrepreneurship. So it was easy for me. So when I went into sales, so first of all, that was a sales job, but it was a 1099. So I eat what I killed. And then at the age of 9, right, when I came here at the age of 9, I was selling my own toys in New York City in the streets to make some money, my used toys. And then at 11, I had my first job where I was doing deliveries for tips, right? Deliveries, got groceries at the supermarket for tips to make money. So it's always been that way. It's always been eat what you kill. And then when I got this job, so I remember when I got the insurance sales job that I got so excited, right? So when I was explaining the compensation, I came home and I was like, babe, to my wife, right? To my girlfriend. I was like, you don't know this opportunity. We're going to be rich. She was like, why? I was like, listen, understand that he just told me that if I sell a policy that's $80 a month, right? I make 50% commission. That's 6 months of the first year. I make $500 on one policy. And I asked him, if I sell 100 of those, I make 500 times. I literally asked him that. He's like, yeah, and that so excited me. But most people, that would scare them because they don't have their sense of security. For me, it excited me. I came home and I was so excited. I was like, can you believe this is the best opportunity ever? I can go and sell as much as I want to make. And there's no cap. I was so excited for that. I was so excited. Of course, it wasn't that easy, right? It required skill. It was a little bit of naiveness, but when I looked at the opportunity, it was like, it's a no-brainer. This is me. Like, this is it. Like, there's nothing holding me back. So it's always been there for me. Always been in my DNA.
You're definitely a born entrepreneur. So do you ever, there's some statistic, I think it said something like 80% of millionaires today are first generation millionaires, because there's something about being the kid of a rich parent where a lot of those kids just don't have any motivation. And that's why actually people love to shit on Donald Trump about many things. One criticism is that he was born wealthy, and that's like a detraction for his economic success. But I actually think it's the other way around. I think if you have a wealthy parent and then you still have the drive and work ethic to work hard and do well, I actually think that's in many ways harder. In some ways it's easier because at least you've seen the model. But for the sense of motivation, a lot of people just aren't motivated. And I think the numbers bear that out, where a lot of kids from successful parents just don't have the motivation. And so do you worry about that? Because you had that drive when you were young. You said, I always want to have apartments so I can always have a roof over my head and shelter and food. And your kids obviously grew up in much better circumstances than you. Do you worry about them having the motivation, or do you have to, when they were young as a parent, were you very careful in distilling those values that not everyone has these opportunities that you have?
That is a really good question, Lawrence. And it's a question that comes up a lot amongst people of means with kids, right? It's a very, very good question. So I'll share the story with you. One day I came home, and I don't know that it was the best thing looking back. But remember, we were kids. My wife and I were two kids raising kids, right? We were doing the best we could with the resources that we had, just like everyone else. So one day I come home, and I had this, at the time I had this house with the big pool in the back, above ground pool in the back, and come home and the kids are in the pool, and they got all of the Wii stations and all of these games that, we've been able to give them, right? This big house. And I was like, man, what am I doing to these kids? Right? My oldest was about 14 years old. He's 27 now. I'm like, what am I doing to these kids? Am I like, are they going to lose my drive? Like, what's happening here? Am I making it too easy? Because it was the hardships that made me.
Yes.
So I got to thinking, and around that time, the owner of the building where I was renting at was looking for a cleaning crew. And when the property manager told me, I said, you know what? I'll clean it for you. The kids will do it. Me and the kids will do it. And I figured I had to figure out a way to show them how to earn a living. And what a better way in my head at the time was to show them what it's like to actually do cleaning work, clean the toilets in the office, vacuum, clean the windows. So we did that as a family. I started a small cleaning company, right? And I literally did that for about 4 years. And that cleaning company bought my oldest son his first car. My second son graduated from Penn State. He bought his first car from there. My daughter also got a big chunk of her first car from that. We were laughing about it yesterday. We went out to dinner and she was like, yeah, it was only $75 a month that you was paying us. I was like, yeah, I know, but you still saved your money for your car, right? So the way I did it was I did that, right? I did that to show them entrepreneurship and to show them work ethic. I don't know, right? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll tell you if it worked. What I can tell you right now, though, Lawrence, is that I have wonderful kids. I have 4 wonderful kids. My oldest is graduating to become a marine biologist, Chris. My second son graduated from Penn State when he graduated during COVID. He has his own marketing company. For Christmas on the year 2019, I gave him an LLC for his birthday because he wanted to be, that was his Christmas gift for 2019. I gave him an LLC. So he went and he learned how to do digital marketing, and he has his own company. He graduated in 2020 when Biden lifted when the government lifted the student loan moratorium thing that they had to pay for it. He paid it cash. He had enough money to pay his student loans cash. He has zero student loans. Wow. He has his own company, marketing company. He's an entrepreneur. My daughter is a tattoo artist. She was a realtor, so she has her own tattoo space here in my office that she rents from me. And she's She's doing, her brother helps her with the marketing. She's funneling clients for her, and she's an artist. And my youngest is one of my sales reps within the company. So they all kind of have that entrepreneur spirit, except for the oldest one. He wants to be a marine biologist. He's always loved animals, always loved the ocean. Good for him. I support him, love him, and that's good. The other three, all entrepreneurs.
That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. Martin, I know you said I saw that beautiful post you had where you said we were just kids having kids doing our best. But obviously you've learned a lot in the last, 27 years or however many years it's been. I've got a 3-year-old. I'm an older parent. Is there any words of wisdom? Because a lot of people listening to this are going to be starting families or thinking about starting families soon or have young kids. Is there any like 1 or 2 nuggets of wisdom that you wish you'd known back then that you know now as a parent?
Oh, brother, that's a good question, man. I think the biggest thing is, well, if knowing what I know now, get them reading early. The reward system. So my reward system with my kids was, hey, you work, you get paid, right? So I was training them, but they saw dad being an entrepreneur. I was training them to be workers. I should have been training them to bring value to the marketplace, because that's how the marketplace works. You bring value, the more value you bring, the more value the market gives you, right? In return, and whatever that is, economic dollars, whatever. So if I could do anything different, I would trade with them value. So either money or experiences for books read.
That's beautiful. And man, I will say this. When I was young, I was a very big reader. My parents didn't have a TV in the house because they were trying to encourage us to either read or play outside, And I'm like everyone else, the last, however many years I've been in real estate, coming up to 10 years now, where I'm so distracted because I use my phone for emails and texts and calls for work. And then I'm like everyone else, I still waste time on there. And I, look at social media and I play with the internet. And it's very hard. My level of concentration to read great books has gone down a lot. And I've noticed just the last few years, I'm really trying to force myself to leave my phone in the other room when I have a break and just read for an hour. And I feel like I've leveled up in mindset, and it's not just the knowledge that I'm getting from the reading, but it's also just being less responsive to just constant things on your phone and that kind of that scattered brain you get from technology. So I think that's such great advice. I really appreciate that, and I'm gonna follow it, because I understand what as a young man who did so well economically, you want to teach them. I can imagine the first thing as a parent is I want to teach them this work ethic, and that's what I think too. But I never thought about it like how you just said. You want to teach them to be thinkers and visionaries and add value, because they're going to get paid exponentially the more value they can give. So that's actually that's wonderful.
100.
Martin, we'll do a part 2 because there's so many other things I want to talk to you about. We don't have too much more time. But the last thing I wanted to ask you is, there's so many options right now. It's almost like you have overanalysis by paralysis, where people hear that, like you said, so many wealthy people got their wealth from real estate, and they watch the Hishi TV shows on flipping, and they're like, I want to do that, but I don't really know what to do. Is there any thoughts you have on just good places to get started where someone can get their foot in the door with real estate when they still don't really know what they're doing? Because I think that I've had so many people ask me for advice and what books to read. I'm actually finishing writing a book. I'm hopefully going to publish in January or February on real estate investing, but there's only a certain amount you can learn from a book. I think you have to get out there and do it and meet the people and get the contacts and have the experience and learn the costly lessons, even if they lose you money. But if it's a great lesson, it's still worth it in the long run. But I'd love to hear some thoughts on, say one of your sons say, Dad, I really want to start trying to parlay some of my money into real estate. What's a good place to start?
Education. Right. So it always starts with education. So my thing is always like, first is, so I have a formula for success that I teach, and then we can probably have a separate podcast on this, and I'll just give it really quick. And it's awesome. You got to decide what you want. So let's say it's real estate. Is that what you really want? Boom. Real estate. Okay, perfect. So 90% of millionaires are made real estate. I want to be a real estate investor. Perfect. That's your decision. But then the next thing you need to do is you need to commit to that. Right. So a decision and a commitment. So you got to decide, and then you got to commit. And when I say commit, I mean really commit, Lawrence. I don't mean like half-ass commit. I'm going to read 1 page a day. I mean really commit. You're going to put it in your schedule. I'm going to learn. And the first thing you should be doing when you commit is you need to learn the basics. I need to learn the basics. How do I run the numbers? How do I do this? Who do I need to be around? I'm going to go to 3 meetups a month. I'm going to go to be around real estate investors. I'm going to commit and totally immerse in that. Laser focus. Number 3 goes with commit. When you commit, number 3 happens automatically, which is massive action. You start taking those actions. You start reading, you start doing, you start going in investments. And then you just got to start doing, like you said, you got to do. You got to do. You can't just stay in the learning phase. You got to, I believe in the formula of input, output, meaning when I learn something, I do it or I teach it. I learn it, I do it or I teach it. Input, output, because that's how I get better.
Yes.
And then if you do those 3 things consistently, decide, commit, massive action, right? You will get results. You will get success. That's a formula.
And no, I love that, because if you're going to meetup groups and you're around those kind of people, it's only a matter of time before someone's going to pull you aside and say, hey, Martin, if you've got a bit of money, there's this great deal. It's off market. You could make X amount of money, and you're going to be exposed to those opportunities. Because one thing I've realized is, I would say half of my transactions that I do on a yearly basis never hit the open market. They're all off market. And that's just, I'm very blessed that I've built over the years a good reputation and a good client base where I can just match buyers and sellers, and I get those opportunities before they hit the market. So that's something that takes time, but your formula is exactly the place to start. So that's beautiful. Martin, this has been such a pleasure. I know we had a bit of a back and forth with the start time, but I really appreciate you being flexible, and we'll definitely do part 2 in a few months. I'd love that. And I look up to you a lot. I look up to you a lot,
man.
brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
The message I love the information you put out online. I love your whole story. It's really, really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing it. And I can't wait for the next time.
Yeah. And I want to share, and I want to just let the young people know, if you're a young man or a young woman listening, and maybe you're in that place where you're painful right now because you're broke, you're poor, and you don't see the light. You're living wherever, in the hood in Chicago or the hood in New York City or the hood wherever. I just want you to know, man, that there is light. If you hang in there, you just got to decide, and commit, and take action. But you got to decide. I know what that pain is like of freaking being underwater, being broke. You got to decide that what it is that you want, and then you got to blinders on, put everything else off, and go focus on that. And I promise you, if you do that, the universe will reward you and your results will show.
That's such a beautiful way to end it. Martin, I'm always a fan. Thank you so much, brother. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.